Everyone, let's welcome Anthony Rapp to Dragon Talk. Yay!
Yay!
So exciting.
And
Hello.
Isabella, let's not forget.
Yeah, that's
You're
Isabella.
familiar in the corner.
Yes.
I love it. She is really just staring straight at the camera. Like,
Yes.
She's like, this is my star turn. I'm ready for my close-up.
finally, all this time.
But many of you may recognize Anthony from Rent, originating the role of Mark Cohen. That's definitely not the first time I knew you, for I loved your turn in Dazed Confused, and even before that with Adventures in Babysitting. So I feel like I've been following your work for 3 decades now.
That means I'm old. Yes.
It means you started young. You were a child prodigy.
Sure. Yeah. Adventures in Babysitting I did here in Toronto, where I'm currently shooting 4th season of Star Trek Discovery. We actually shot it mostly in Toronto. Also, that's my cat, Spike.
You're a real wizard. I love it.
I know. So.
Right.
Yes.
And so the nerddom is high for your turn as Stamets in Star Trek Discovery. I was super excited when, I've been a Star Trek fan for a long time too. And so being able to combine, my fandom of your work there with that whole universe has been a really fun journey over the last 3 seasons.
Thank you. Yeah. And, I've been a nerd since I was a little kid, and I always thought I always imagined myself as like an audience member of these kinds of things. I never thought of myself. I never even dared to think, oh yeah, I'd like to be in any of those movies or TV shows. I just thought I'd be a consumer of them and a fan of them. So suddenly to get the opportunity to be a part of it was mind bending and has been a dreamy, dreamy experience. So yeah, there's a child. Yeah. A child
That was my familiar.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Dragon Talk of guests, of smaller guests.
Rotating cast. You never know what you're going to get here.
That's right.
Cats and kids.
Yes.
And I've got dragon minis, making their appearances as much as possible too.
Sure.
If we see them moving in the background, then I'm going to have a real problem.
Give me a heads up.
That's awesome.
Greg.
Of course, we're talking to you here on Dragon Talk because you have been playing Dungeons and Dragons with some of your castmates for Discovery over the last few months, and I've been super entertained by reading your after-action reports of what happens after each session, and
Thanks.
It's how we were able to connect on all this, and it's been really great.
Yeah, thank you. I actually have also been doing some recaps of I'm in 2 campaigns right now. So it's like an embarrassment of riches after not playing since I was like 12 until now. COVID thankfully gave us the opportunity to figure out we can actually have games with people that you're not in the same room with, which has always been the problem, right? Yeah. Getting enough people in the same town or city, at least in my profession where I'm traveling so much. So it's been a great thing. And I'm playing very different characters, and the campaigns they're quite different in tone, and it's been aspects of it more wonderful than I even thought it might be. So I've been super nerding out, following along with all the incredible developments that have been happening in D&D over the last few years, especially even more recently. And then Critical Role I've fallen in love with, and Fantasy High, and there's this whole world that I didn't even know was existing. It was like this alternate universe that has availed itself to me, and it's been incredible, especially in these very difficult times. It's been like such an oasis of joy.
That's so nice.
Yeah,
I'm glad. I remember when we found out about your cast game, and just it seemed like the entire community just blew up with excitement. Like, I cannot believe, it was like 2 wonderful nerdoms colliding, and people were so excited. Were you expecting to get that kind of reaction when that news had broke?
No, I didn't expect anything. I just thought it'd be fun to share. I figured there might be a little bit of crossover, but it's been a wonderful embrace and a nice warm embrace, and we've really appreciated that. And Noah, who's our DM, also had a great little recurring role on this past season of Discovery, and he's married to Mary Wiseman, who plays Tilly, and he's been so wonderfully embraced by the fandom, also for his role as Rin, the Andorian guy. So it's been great for him to get to express his because he was a Star Trek super fan before he got to do the show. Before Mary got cast in the show, they were already together at that point. So it's just like it's a great blend of personal and it doesn't even feel professional what we're doing on Twitter with the game. It's not professional exactly. It's just, but because it's part of our professional life that we're castmates and working together, it's just a perfect little blend of, the personal professional worlds coming together in a great way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has it helped?
I feel like the community. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, has it helped like the bonding
excited.
of cast members? As far as like because now no spoilers for season 3, but it does seem like there's a little family that's being created, and a lot of those roles in Star Trek are also in the cast as well, right?
Yeah.
That you're playing with.
Yeah, and we were trying to entice Wilson. Wilson, who plays Culber, he's never played D&D before, and he was interested. He was thinking maybe he'd be a barbarian, but he's just like a little overwhelmed by the rules and all that stuff, which is understandable because it is a big thing to like dive into for the first time if you've never done anything like this before. And so he was kind of dragging his feet a little bit, and so in went my fiance Ken into his possible slot. Because I'd been kind of like trying to entice Ken in. I've been like, try it. And he was watching a little bit of Critical Role with me. He was reading the books. Noah was sort of walking him through. And because I understand when people are intimidated by it, because it's a lot at first, but then it also becomes more and more manageable, obviously, the more you lean into it. And it's been especially sweet for me to have Ken along. And his little character has been totally embraced by the other people in the party. He's playing a turtle monk.
Such a good character.
Hard not to love a turtle.
I know. And he's like this sort of like blissed out guy. It's been great.
That is wonderful. What is it like to play with your partner? Because I mean, I don't actually like it.
Oh. It's been great for me because I'm so glad that, for a while when I was started playing again in the summer, it's actually with a mutual friend of ours, that somebody that Ken is quite close with is the DM in that game, Mark, and he'd been kind of like trying to see if Ken might join, but Ken, understandably a little intimidated and everything. So I would talk to him about it and he'd be like, So now to get to really share it with him fully is just that much more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. I kind of jest. Like I will play D&D with Bart, and I really like him as a dungeon master, but sometimes as a player he's like a little too much of like an instigator and like just does things that I find a little too annoying.
That's funny.
I'm like, come on,
that's funny.
Don't make a mess. It's like it's too much real world in our fantasy. Like clean that up. Like you're not just gonna leave that on the table.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, so far it's interesting because I feel like each of our characters is kind of different from ourselves. So it's a nice way to just have a different, and our characters don't really know each other, so we're getting to know each other. So that's all. It's a fun way to interact, in a different context.
Yeah, you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, thanks.
It's me who's doing it wrong.
Oh, probably.
That totally makes sense.
I don't know.
So you said you played when you were 12. I'm interested a little bit to kind of get that origin story and how that experience went, and what kind of characters did you latch onto then, and if that's true still now when you're playing.
So my nerdy friends and I were ambitious but very disorganized. So I'd created, I don't even know how many characters. I spent a lot of time like reading the books, reading the remember they were called modules?
They were called modules, yeah.
And I have a memory of like maybe one or two actual sessions, but we just never got it together to really do it. But like I poured over those books. I had character sheets. I would roll and do all that. But what I always was drawn to is what was then called just pure thief. They weren't called rogues, and halfling. So a halfling thief was my character that I played, the little that I played, and that's the one that always stuck with my memory. So when I got asked again to join our friend Mark's game, that I had to be a halfling rogue. I just had to. So, and in the meantime, I'd also played Baldur's Gate, on computer, and I had played Dragon Age. and Dragon Age Inquisition, which is not exactly D&D, but in the realm
adjacent. I was going to ask you if that's what your cat was named after. Is that Isabella from Dragon Age?
No, she's Isabella because she and her brother are Ferdinand and Isabella, kind of
okay.
Two famous names that sound good together, even though they're not great people, but good names. So Bartholomew, who's the character in the one campaign, had to be a halfling rogue, which I know is kind of tropey in its own way, but I don't care because it's kind of perfect. And
it works.
And I wanted him to be an arcane trickster. I didn't even know enough yet at that point about like the subclass, but I knew that I wanted him to be like able to do some spells if possible. So then I worked that out. Yeah.
Nice.
And then and back then too, there were limitations. You could only be certain things if you were a halfling. You couldn't be, you couldn't be a fighter, I think, if you were a halfling, or you could, but there were penalties. There were all these different things. Like race, there were more restrictions. So it's been cool to see among the many evolutions that all those limitations are coming off. And that it gives that much more freedom for people.
Yeah, and there's even more changes to come about like how we can think about the different lineages of halfling and elf and how a lot of those mechanical restrictions, I think make sense back in the day because they were like thematic and like, that was what they were going. And then we're realizing now that just the amount of stories that you can tell when you give people the freedom, it's such a better trade-off, right? Because it just expands on the creativity. But that's an interesting point to see like how you went from, poring over those books. I was definitely in that same camp where I didn't get to play very often. I had a strong Catholic background, which also kind of restricted the amount of devotion I could give to Dungeons & Dragons, even though privately I was like, oh my God, these books are so cool and I want to play them. Still only had a few sessions as I was a kid. But then coming into it as an adult, it was really nice to just experiment and have that sense of play again. And so it seems like you're having that same journey with discovering this again in 2020.
And I love games in general, and I love like figuring out games and systems. And I knew that that part would appeal to me. And I thought the role playing would be fun, but I didn't expect it to have quite so much resonance because I'm an actor. So I get to do that for a living. So I thought, that's, that'll be fun or whatever, but it's actually become so much more fun and so much more interesting than I even would have anticipated. The opportunity for collaborative storytelling. As an actor, I'm given a script, which is great. I get to bring other people's words to life. Like we create our characters together, but it's sort of handed to you. And I love that part of my job. It's my job to bring that to life. But then there's something extra special about having it all come from within. And then what happens between us and these wonderful moments that happen just because we decide that that's the way it's going to go, and then of course what fate does with dice rolls and all that stuff too. But the unexpected, the mysterious nature of not knowing exactly how things are going to play out. And what, I have an idea of who these characters are, but I'm also discovering them over time and they're growing and changing just as human beings would, or elves or whoever, but as beings would change. And that's something that I didn't anticipate until I actually got in the thick of doing it. That has been incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. I guess that's true too. I'm like with a character that, like you said, you're given a script, the beginning, the middle, the end, and same. Well, you're also, playing a character. How much freedom do you have in the characters that you play to kind of add your own spin on them? Certainly not the way you can with D&D.
Yes. But yeah, and generally, text-wise, I like the challenge of you're given lines that are written a certain way, and it's my job to bring them to life as written. Mm-hmm. I like that. Every once in a while, there's like certain things like, can we tweak it a little bit that makes a little more sense to me? And that's, there's room to have that kind of collaboration. And I like operating inside those restrictions. But yes, when it's all up to me, it's a totally new world. And I've done some improv before, I have experience with that. So that wasn't so foreign, the idea of improving, but I just didn't expect it to have the kind of resonance, the emotional life and richness that has come to be in our games. And there's moments already. We've had 12 sessions maybe of each or so. So it's not a ton, but it's enough to really have some things
yeah.
that stand out and things that I don't think I'll ever forget. You know, little wonderful, little surprising moments that have happened.
And sometimes those hit harder because they're organic and improv in the moment than they would be if it was scripted work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's I didn't, you know, that's happened to me as dungeon master or as player too, just being like, I didn't know that I was going to have this emotional response or do the things that I'm choosing to do. But in this moment, it feels so right. And that's where I think this game kind of transcends and becomes, you know, that collaborative storytelling that you can't really get in other formats.
Yeah, I don't know what else it would be. I mean, an improv comedy kind of, but those are like little bite-sized chunks, you know, something that, you know, goes over time like this. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything comparable to it.
The only thing I've found is like music. You know, sometimes the improv music, the back and forth between the audience as well as the band or the performer can sometimes feel like that, but it still feels very, very different because they're not dealing with swords and bows and arrows and magic.
And real life. And
you know, the Grateful Dead is up there. They're like, they're raising the dead in their music, but not so much in their spells.
And I'm starting to, you know, toy with the idea of DMing and that it certainly appeals. It's a little intimidating, you know, like the scale and scope of what's possible feels like, wow, so much. But I wonder when I know that DMs have plans and I know that they have notions about what can happen and they set things up, but of course anything can happen. So like, do you find as a DM yourself, do you find like hard to divorce yourself from what you thought the way something was going to go, you know?
Oh yeah.
Shelley, you can talk to that.
That was a bad experience. So I am desperately trying to get myself to try DMing again. I want to. I really, really want to. But I had a bad try at it, and because of I stuck too much to a script. I never anticipated even being a player myself, and I know like, we're a wily bunch, and we often don't do what's planned, but I did not anticipate what would happen if the players didn't do exactly what I thought. I couldn't think. I panicked, and then I couldn't ever catch myself up to that of just being like, okay, fine. So they went into town instead of into the woods. Just make what was going to happen in the woods happen in town. I know that now, but I did not know that then. So the whole thing just went. And I actually was probably like angry at the players too because they didn't do what I wanted.
Wait, was your husband, was Bart in?
He was not. He was not actually. They were the nicest. It was a wonderful, nice group of people that was just like willing to let me practice on them, and they wanted to help me. And I was just so like, I'm so ashamed and I'm terrible, and I'm really kind of secretly mad that you guys didn't go into the woods, and so now I don't even want to play with you. But I'm so much better now. I just haven't. I learned a lot since then.
Sure.
So you just, definitely do not just expect the unexpected and kind of have like signposts along the way. Like this should happen, and it can happen in this way, or this way, whatever.
Yeah.
And if you're Greg, you don't prepare anything, and you just whip up a really awesome story on the fly, and everybody thinks you spend months planning it, and he's like, "Oh no, I didn't even know who these characters were. Nope, just pull them out."
That is the most fun for me at this point because I'm, I have experience writing. I've done, scripts and plays and things like that, and you can't write it that way in any way. Like, and
Sure.
I probably had those experiences that you had, Shelley, early on. I mean, maybe that's why the 1 or 2 sessions that we played, in junior high didn't go as well, is because we probably were sticking to, oh, this has got to be like, The Hobbit.
Yeah.
This has got to be like Dragonlance or have those feels. And it very, clearly, I didn't learn then until I was an adult that it's much better to write in bullet points of like, here's things that could happen, and if they do, great. If they don't, try to weave them in some ways. Like that's the amount of prep that I do. It's usually like 1 page or just thinking about it over the course of the week as far as what the next session is going to be. Because, you can prep so much and have this whole dungeon planned out. And as you said, they'll just go to town.
Yeah, they
going to the
never
dungeon.
set foot in it. So
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Yes. The other thing, I've gotten a lot of really good advice. And one of the other things that always stuck with me, if the players aren't doing what you need them to do, invent an NPC that kind of like guides them to it, and that you could just you can basically tell them anything you want through the voice of this NPC.
Sure.
And then if all else truly fails and you just start bumbling everything, just say, that's how things work in my world.
Yes.
And then cross your arms, cross your chest,
Yes.
and just pout, stick out your bottom lip. No,
Yeah.
but really, like, I think that not worrying about the rules is the number one rule. Like, don't stress about the rules.
Yeah. When you say the rules, you don't mean like, you mean what you think, what rules of what people think DM means, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Or even like the actual rules in the game. Like, you can break all of them. And I know this to be a fact because the people who write the rules were the ones who actually told me that.
Yeah.
I remember like Jeremy Crawford would say, "Oh, don't worry about those rules." I'm like, but you spend your whole life writing those rules. Like, I want to treasure them and carry them with me and put them in my heart. But he's like, nah, whatever works for you and your players, just do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I've really been loving, as I've been developing these characters too, like filling in gaps of their history as I learn more about the world itself too. And it's like, how I think that this little piece of their life resonates with this. And I share that with the DMs and just give them, it feels like I'm giving them little things that they can maybe play with down the road. I don't know if it'll pay off or not directly, but it's just a way to have that kind of collaboration too. Here, this is something else that I've thought of, and here's something else that I've thought of. And these are some more little details that I came up with. So do with it what you will, kind of thing.
Do you do that with the other players too? Do you guys work on your backstories together?
No, because in each of them, none of us knew one another before we joined together. So I've liked that approach in this case of like getting to know each other and like we get these little clues, and like in the disco game, we call it disco, the discovery game. Blue's character Bink kind of revealed his story. He's a 13-year-old tiefling who didn't know he was a tiefling. He was adopted and raised by elves and didn't start showing tiefling traits until puberty. So he started sprouting horns and a tail, and skin started turning color. And then his parents kind of freaked out because they're kind of religious. And so he shared that with us pretty early. He's this 13-year-old kid out on his own, like having left home because he's not safe there anymore. So he revealed that early. And that was very cool that we could kind of bond with him that way. But like my character's a little more circumspect about sharing he's had a more complicated life. He's an adult. He's had some really weird things happen. So little clues, but I kind of don't want to tell my fellow players. I want to, if it comes up, it'll come up, but I don't want to like give it away exactly. I want to see how it comes up between us,
That's the best. Yeah. And you mentioned your, fandom of Critical Role. And I feel like that's something that Matt and that entire cast do so well, is build off each other's moments so that you learn about their stories organically. And because they're such great, actors and performers as well, you almost don't see the seams that you can see in a regular D&D campaign, and it feels seamless.
Yeah, and that's happening, that's happening in both campaigns naturally. And I don't, maybe a couple of people in each campaign watch Critical Role, but it's not like something that people are consciously doing. Like, we want to do this now. We want to be like them. I think it's been a source of inspiration for me in the sense that I see what's possible in terms of the depths that you can go to in creating these relationships.
Yeah, and I think
there's
that's
no real recipe. It's hard to. I mean, you can't. It's magic when it happens, when you have the right group together like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why D&D's been so popular now, is because of all of this video of people playing in different ways and different styles, and you have this wealth of inspiration for everyone. I mean, even just the experience that you had, Anthony, where you're talking about like, hey, we played it once and then it didn't work out and I didn't touch it for decades. I've heard that so many times, among so many people. And there's a very real possibility before the internet, before there was the sharing of ideas that we have right now, that you would have never played again, right? Yeah. And I think, by having more people see the style and recognize what they like about a certain DM or a certain way to play the game, has allowed more people to continue to find the group that works for them and the dynamic that works for them, and then, follow their bliss.
Yes. And, thank you, COVID.
You got to find the silver linings when you can.
You must have knowledge of like it must be kind of just exploding in some ways. Like if you guys have access to knowing, do you have a sense of knowing like how many people are engaging with it, like in their own games on the various websites and stuff like that? I mean, is that something that you have awareness of?
Yeah. We've seen, it's actually, to be quite honest, there's been an upward trajectory since 5th edition came out in 2014. There's been a wealth of people, and I think that also kind of coincided with the rise of Twitch, the rise of Let's Play kind of things on YouTube. So it was already getting into the mainstream kind of consciousness before then. And then, of course, yeah, you're right. As quarantines dropped, there was that adjustment period. But then I think people very quickly were like, well, we can't meet up in person to roll dice around a table. Let's try to do these connections. And then that showed how other people who may not have been playing or not even really be interested in playing have certainly come to the game over the last, year. Because it's been the only way to kind of feel like you're getting outside and going on adventures.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I go back to like, it took Ken, it was months really essentially of me like trying to go here, and I can imagine that's the case for some people too. It must be intimidating for some people. I get it,
Yeah.
Oh,
it feels big. It feels like too much to handle. But, it's like, come on, join us.
It's so fun. Yeah, and the thing we always tell is that the rules, like Shelley said, it's like the rules can feel intimidating, but I always try to dissuade anybody from harping on that. Like, there's always going to be someone at the table who can help you. There's always someone on the video, if you have a question, someone can answer it. And don't ever feel, like you can't walk into a game without having an insight. Because, they're big books. They're 300 pages. There's no way anybody's going to have a complete knowledge of that. What's important is just having the desire to have the imagination and make those choices. That's really all that matters.
But even that's hard for some people too. Yeah. Just to say like, well, there's no rules. Yeah. Just do whatever you want. Like that's a very hard thing for a lot of people to grasp. Is like, but I need some boundaries. Yeah. So I think it was you, Greg,
the right way to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, was it when we were playing with some new people and you were introducing them to D&D. I think either you gave this advice or you actually did it, but you with those people that you can see like the paralysis, like choice paralysis, I can do anything. Then it's better to give them some choices. Like, do you want to do this thing or this thing? Do you want to cast a spell? Do you want to go talk to a person? And then they slowly get the idea of what, they can do anything. Because we're all, people are used to like video games or board games or things that like they're a little bit on rails and you do have some choice. But yeah, I remember just trying to explain D&D to like my parents and they were just like, but where is the board? Right. Who do you like? How do you walk around a board? Like there is no board. There's nothing.
Well, there can be a board.
Yeah.
Well, there can be. And there can be a representation of your character, but there could also just be nothing.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah.
Do you, when you're playing, Greg, are you DMing more now or playing or both?
I'm doing more DMing right now. And I love having the physical things, and then that was missing for me when we were playing in quarantine. So I've taken to... doing some digital things like showing maps and things through the computer, but then also having a camera so I can actually show the physical representation of their minis and how they're moving around and what the thing is. And I find that just adds just another layer of immersion.
Yes. Yeah, that's what Noah's been doing, that version where he's been having the camera on. But when you're playing with players, do you have a feeling like when people describe their character in third person or first person?
Most of my players that I'm playing with now do it in third person.
They do in third person. It's interesting.
Yeah. And I found that actually the players who do that think about this game more as a strategy tactics game. they're not necessarily. And so I'm much more of I like story and tactics. So I like the blend, and I've been concentrating on trying to so what you cast that spell, but what did it look like? Can you describe it? How do you feel? What are the magic words that you're saying?
Yeah.
Even 20 sessions in, I'm still kind of trying to prompt them, and I'm seeing some cracks in them wanting to do more of that, but it's sometimes it feels like pulling teeth.
Yeah, that feels like I understand how that could be intimidating for people, but that's to me one of the very big joys is getting inside the head of another person. But that's the part that I'm an actor, so it comes a little more easily to me,
Yeah, and I think honestly that I'm dealing with HR people and tech people and blah blah blah, and so they're very much more about the how do I win this encounter quickly?
Yes. Have you had any character deaths?
Yes, actually. Shelley's husband Bart was killed in session 2 or 3.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Early
on.
Maybe he's better. Maybe he wasn't too attached to that character.
That's what he said. I mean, he was he was good about it. He kind of was just and it was honestly because the cleric abandoned them. Essentially to go and fight, and you're like, but you're supposed to be healing them, and he's like, he'll be fine, and he was not fine.
Oh wow!
Oh no!
What about you? Has there been deaths?
Knock on wood. There was. So Bink is Squishy, Bink's little wizard, and Bink got hit by an Ankh-egg in this encounter, and I had forgotten. I was still getting used to it. It's my first time playing a druid, and that healing word could be a bonus action,
right?
So I was like, oh, wait, bonus action before the Ankh-egg hits him, because I just gone. I was like, oh, wait. If I hadn't done that, and if Noah hadn't allowed it, the hit would have killed him instantly.
Wow.
Because it was a critical hit, and it would have done, double damage to his hip points.
No.
And he would have been dead. And that would have been terrible for us. Because he'd already been hit enough that it would have just taken him down,
Yeah.
So that was really brutal. That was a brutal moment, and I'm grateful that because I'm still figuring out the character. I'm grateful that it was a little finagling in the sense that the timing was just a little off. But I was like, wait, I can do something to stop that.
That's good. Good thinking.
But that would have been, because we love Bink, and I mean we would have figured out what to do. We would have moved on. But I do think that's one of the wonderful things about the story, though, that can happen. That sense of danger, I think, is also important.
Yeah.
And prior to that, we had an encounter where Noah had put us up against these big monsters. We were really freaked out about it. We snuck up on them, and then we had to wait a week before we fought them. They didn't touch us. They rolled terribly. Oh, I remember. So we got out of that encounter totally unscathed. We crushed it. So we were feeling really good. And then the next session is when Bink almost died. So it was
Oosh.
So
yeah.
That's so far the closest we've come.
That's a good moment. I like that because that's now Bink might have different feelings towards your character because of what your character did to save them. And also in real life too, I'm sure.
Yes.
I remember when somebody saved my character by taking half of her damage. Otherwise she would have died. And I just thought that is the most selfless thing anyone's ever done for me. I think in real life, no, in my D&D, no, I think in real life too. Yep, I think it was. And I still love that person that played that character because he made the choice as his character to do that. But it does. It's hard to not meld real life with your fantasy life sometimes. But that's what makes it so fun. That's why those stories are so great from what happens at the table.
And especially in this case, my relationship with Blue tends to be, I feel very protective to Blue, and I feel this sort of parental feeling. And our characters have sort of naturally developed that anyway, just by given the nature of the character Blue's playing. So it fit in really well. And Ken's character got bashed around a bit last couple of sessions, but we were healing him, but he kept getting knocked unconscious. But he never had to make a death saving throw. But sometimes you got to be the character taking the hits. Right. Sometimes to be able to let other things, to take the focus of the fire sometimes it's part of the job.
I think it's a strength too of this edition because, where D&D is now, because there are those death saves. You have those dramatic moments, but it's very much different than early D&D, which was like, oh, you rolled a die, you're dead. That's it. There's no way to there's no even damage. It's just like, nope, save or die. And I actually had one of my early sessions. I was a girl in college was DMing for some of my housemates, one of who had never played D&D before either. And it was a similar thing where she was like, come on, play with us. And he finally agreed to play. He was a novelist, so he's used to writing his own stories. And one of those moments happened where I think he was like a table of food, and he ate some food. And as the module was written, it was like, all right, you make a saving throw. Oh, you failed it. You're dead.
Oh my
goodness. The campaign ended at that moment.
Yeah.
He was so angry. He was like, you told me that, and this was like, 3 or 4 sessions in. He was like, you told me this game was great, blah, blah, blah. I didn't get a chance. I was just eating some food, and then all of a sudden I'm dead. We never played together again. And so they can very rarely go off the rails. And I just don't think those situations exist in the current iteration of Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to be getting up into.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And because there wasn't... Yeah.
That person who lost their character is one of those people that, is never going to, maybe not going to play D&D again because they had a bad experience doing it. And who knows what they're missing. Hopefully they had another opportunity and it was much different. But that's exactly the stories that we were just talking about. Some of your early experiences didn't go quite as planned, and maybe that kept you away from the hobby for a while. But hopefully you find your way back.
I don't want my characters to die, but if they do, of course I'll live with. I'll get over it. I'm sure, but I'm grown quite attached to them.
Well, that's the thing. As you get progressed in level, there are ways to bring people back.
Yes.
And so that becomes a quest unto itself. I'm thinking, gosh, the Star Trek analogy there of Search for Spock is huge.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Speaking of which, we got this great question from a friend of mine, Cicero Holmes, on Twitter, who was, has been following along. He's a Star Trek nerd as much as a D&D nerd. And he said that castmates have been playing together, but what do you think the game would be like if, Paul, Hugh, Adira, and Gray were playing together? Do you think it would be similar?
I think that Paul would be a rules lawyer. I'm like, I want to make sure that we're being fair with the rules, but I don't get weird about the rules, but I just want to make sure that we're observing, that we're using them appropriately. But Paul would be a little hardcore. I think that Adira and Gray would be really free and go for it and have fun. And Hugh, it would probably be hard to get him to concentrate on it because he'd be thinking about other things. That's what I think. That's my initial take on it. And that Adira and Gray would be the driving forces of it happening.
I could see Hugh being the reluctant cleric who would be like, I have to heal you, but he's not happy about it.
Yes. Yes, the Laura Bailey.
Exactly. Yes. That's awesome.
So you mentioned that you have 2 different campaigns going, and they're very different.
Yeah.
So what's the other one like?
The makeup of the party is quite different. So in the disco party, we have a ranger, a druid, a cleric, a bard, and a wizard. So that's sort of an unusual makeup in some ways, you could say. And of the several of us are sort of wood elf heritage or nature. It's a very nature-y kind of thing, which is kind of interesting. And Mary Wiseman thought maybe in part because of the nature of what we're all going through this past year, we're all trying to find some way to connect to nature. And so that's how
everybody just wants to be outside.
Yes. So that's kind of informed that. Whereas in the other campaign, we have a paladin and a fighter. So that right there, we got 2 sort of more classic kind of tanky, heavy hitter kind of people. I'm a rogue, which is its own kind of thing. And then we have a wild mage satyr.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then, sorry, who am I missing? And a cleric. So maybe a little more traditional in some ways, I guess you could say, in terms of the makeup. And we've adopted a goblin in that. There was a goblin troop that got decimated that we don't know how. And one of them was left, and he was initially fighting with us, and then our paladin, who's on this quest to like make the world a better place, like tried to reason with him and kind of keep him along. And now he's actually become a part of our party for the moment. And our DM is playing him. And he actually has become a warlock. He actually made a pact with some crazy god recently. So that just happened. So
whoa.
Yeah.
That could be good, or it could not be. Yeah.
Yeah. So far, and our paladin is kind of our leader-ish, probably you could say, and he's very much on a quest to like try to create knights of his order around the world. And so there's this kind of, I don't know, this do-gooder feeling there. And our other party, it's not that it's not do-gooder, but we're just a little more like, we're not quite so like trying to be crusaders. We've been asked to help out with some things, and we're trying to find our way. And we're very keyed into like what's happening in the natural world, especially. Like if people are messing with that, we're like, we want to stop that, kind of thing from happening. So it's just the tonally is just a little different,
Are the styles of the games different? Because every DM usually has a different way of doing things, or have they been similar?
I think they're similar in the sense that, there's opportunities where we're just sort of hanging out and chit-chatting and role playing like at watch or whatever. And then there's other times we have some really well thought about encounters, battles, tactic stuff. I think that both DMs do a really good job of giving space to both aspects. And I think in both cases too, both DMs of Noah and Mark, there's some players who are more experienced, some players who are less experienced, and they've been great at working with both, and trying to give opportunities for everyone to experience those chances to make decisions, make choices, to start to be empowered to do things and not just sort of like be led around by a leash kind of thing. This is nice.
Yeah.
Like the Dungeon Masters.
Yeah, they're great. They're great for that. And they, they really dive into the, playing the NPCs and all that stuff, which is fun. We've had some puzzles in both.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah,
ambitious.
It's been good. And I believe they both are doing there are aspects where they started out with like a beginnings of a campaign book that had some stuff to build off of, but they're both fully into their own homebrew world now. And Mark's wife is an artist, and she created a map for us.
Oh, nice.
And there was like a couple
really cool.
cities that are familiar, like I think Waterdeep is on the map, but then there's lots of other places that are just his that he made up. And, so that's the part but when I think about DMing, I recognize there's all these different established worlds, and I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in like, what is there to create? And there's so many chances to like build who knows what.
Yeah. We've got a lot of data that suggests that people love to play the adventures like whole cloth. There's a certain group of D&D player that likes doing, Rime of the Frostmaiden, and we're just doing this, and it's in Icewind Dale, and it's using all of the stuff that's in the book. But there's, I think a very vibrant part of the community that just takes pieces, just like Mark the DM that was, Waterdeep is in my world, but there's also 6 other locations that I just made up whole cloth, and those are pulled from, I don't know, Star Trek, from Lord of the Rings, or they could be from anywhere, and that's the part, as a writer or a creator that is super fun, is to be able to have that freedom to be like, all right, this is fan fiction-y, but it really doesn't matter because it's just for an audience of 5 or 6.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I did a little one-shot thing too with there's this podcast called Botched. I don't know, they've done like live shows at Dragon Con and stuff like that.
Nice.
So I did a little one-shot with them, and it was set in like sort of an Old West setting. So that was just fun to live in that world for a minute too, with magic and D&D rules, but in a kind of, Wild West situation. So
yeah. I mean, there's always that fantasy genre that we know and love, but there's so many different flavors of that, and then there's there's horror, there's sci-fi, there's all these things that that I love when they get mixed and layered in, and you're not sure. Oh wait, this is from something else. And it messes with the tropes, as you're saying. So that leads me to another question from Twitter, from Dave Clark. I think you might have even actually responded to this on Twitter a little bit as you were thinking about it, so you might have had some thoughts. But Discovery, definitely Star Trek Discovery tries to take some of those familiar Star Trek tropes and turn them on their heads. Yeah. And as you guys are playing through the D&D and the fantasy and some people being more experienced with that and some people not, do you find that different players lean into tropes, or do you actively try to subvert them? How do you see those both groups of those players interacting with things that people might know from Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like I said, I'm playing a halfling rogue, so that feels pretty tropey in a certain sense. But I don't think that Bartholomew is particularly like anyone that I've encountered before, like in Lord of the Rings, for instance. And I worked on his story in a way that there are some tragic aspects of it, but he's not like a gloomy person. He's made the choice to like try to live a kind of as positively as possible, given the tragic things that have happened. It's also a way to survive it and compensate for it. So that feels to me like a little bit of subverting tropes or working against tropes per se, because I know that a lot of people like the tragic backstory, the gloomy character kind of thing. At least in his case, but he's also not like jokey, like I'm going to joke with everybody all the time. Not that kind of trope either. It's been interesting to feel him out, and his relationship with the Paladin has been an interesting thing too, because like there was one time when we found this hovel of a bugbear, and I found a chest, but the Paladin didn't see me find it. And I was able to open it, and inside was 300 gold, and I kept it for myself. And the Paladin, like the player knew that happened, but the Paladin didn't see it happen. I hid it from him. So I've still hidden that from him. But we also have like a good relationship. But, like, I don't think a rogue is going to tell the Paladin that he kept the money. You know what I mean? It's like, so I don't know if that's tropey or not, but it feels true to the sort of situation. But at the same time, right now, I also found at one point a treasure map that I didn't tell him about. But we've had some interactions recently that there's part of me that's thinking maybe I do want to tell him about that and maybe want to involve him in it after all. Kind of thing. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So it's like we've shared some stuff in the meantime that's kind of deepened our relationship, and I'm not quite so like, oh, the Paladin's such a do-gooder. He is, but we all, I understand him more now. So I guess that's sort of tropey. My druid, for instance, I didn't even know that there's this trope of druids who are like hippies. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, but that's not how I've ever thought about. I've thought about when I was thinking about him, I think like somebody who's like deeply serious about nature, like feels this kind of like profound protective feeling about it that will burn someone to the ground if with it, kind of thing. So that's more my druid. He's kind of like intense in a way that I'm not sure if people play druids that way. I don't know. I've since found out a lot of people are like, hey, I'm a druid. And that's not my druid.
Yeah, there's the two branches. You can go stoner druid or serious druid.
Yeah. So So that's been fun.
Yeah.
And the two characters are quite different from each other, and it's been really cool to like live in two different ways of looking at things too. Just go from different campaigns.
Well, what I found too is sometimes I think tropes are not a bad word. I think that they are something that is actually really important, especially for newer players, because I think that's the power fantasy that kind of fuels the desire to learn more about this game and interact with all the systems as well as the role playing, right? And so, I mean, Shelley was saying how I played with new players who were adults for the first time. Gosh, that was before pandemic, wasn't it, Shelley? That was a long time ago.
Yeah, we were in person.
But the way I try to describe it, I'm like, what is a character from a movie or a book that you really loved, and that you've always wanted to be, right? And and that's the thing that you kind of need to latch onto at first, and then you can deviate it, there. And it sounds like that's what you're doing a little bit with your our Bartholomew character, is that you're like, all right, well, this is the kind of sneaky burglary rogue who's doesn't necessarily have a heart of gold at all. But you're like, okay, well, now that I have a deeper relationship with the cop, for lack of a better word, for a paladin, that you're like, all right, well, now I can deviate from that. And I think that's, a part of what this game actually is, the strength of it.
Absolutely. And we had my character also had a really interesting interaction with our cleric, because my character is not religious, and partly because of some of the things that have happened. It's like, no. But then so we had a thing where we like saved some people who'd been captured, and that sort of reminded him of things that had happened in his life, and just asking the cleric, okay, how do you reconcile this? What does your God have to say about something like what we just saw today, where these people were taken hostage and their lives were threatened and they didn't deserve it, and what does your God have to say about this? And the cleric opened up about some of his own experiences and how he came to his faith and how he came to his relationship with his God. And it was like this really wonderfully rich moment. And, I don't know that means that Bartholomew is going to become, have a relationship with the God, but it was like things are happening that are kind of like changing his perspective a little bit. And it's been really cool to sort of lean into those moments and not know what it might turn into.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how the idea of all of you discovering these things about each other's characters, much the way you would with any new group of friends. Like it feels very, just natural. And it's, in D&D, we tend to be a lot better about like just being around and understanding people who are different from our own, beliefs and upbringings. I feel like, just hearing you talk, about your character who's not religious because, there are reasons from that character's past. That's a real world, feeling that somebody might have towards religion. And then being around somebody who's deeply religious, there could often be just either like, I'm not going to deal with this person. I don't want to get to know this person. But like in D&D, you kind of are forced to have those relationships. And look, they work out. Like, you actually do come to understand these people in a different way, and now your relationship with that person is totally changing.
And I'm also grateful that Greg, the player, was willing to just lean into that moment too, and just not. Yeah. He couldn't have predicted I was going to have that conversation with him, and he just leaned into it and opened up, and it was something really special. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is special.
So when you guys are on set, do you talk about this game a lot?
Yes.
Are other cast members like, get me in there, I want to play?
Yes.
Or are they like,
yes,
the D&D nerds are talking again?
A little bit of both, but like Sonequa, for instance, she would love to play. She just has no time. Like she is, carrying the show. She has 2 small children when she's not on set. It's just as much as she wanted to, and so maybe we can figure out a way if she could like join us for like a session or 2 or something, just so she can dip her toe in it, because she'd be great at it too. She'd totally lean into it, and just like, I know she would love it. She loves games. What we had been doing as a group before this was Mafia,
Oh, really?
Which is a nice thing you can do with a bunch of people. D&D tends to have to be a little smaller. So she was like a natural person. We said, would you like to join? And it's just not possible. She has no bandwidth for it, understandably. But we talk about, but like Mary and I were on set the other night, and we were talking about like, we just leveled up to level 5. So like, yeah, what spell are you going to use? What spell are you going to use? Like that kind of stuff. So level 5 is a big one. It's a big jump. It's a big jump.
You get 3rd level spells, right?
Yeah. I mean, she's a ranger, so she gets, some stuff, but yeah, it's big. I get call lightning. I get guaranteed call lightning because of my circle.
Nice. So that's a big guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have to select it. It's always there.
Nice. Now Noah's shaking his boots, trying to come up with challenges for you now.
Yes. I know. He's been throwing some good challenges at us. We've gotten to be pretty good. Like Little Bink has turned into like a damage. Like those wizards, they can hurt people.
From a distance.
They can. I mean, they can get hurt too, you know. But
right. They are squishy.
But I remember, like, it was a great thing that Blue did in the first moment. Like, Blue is this kid just learning these spells. We have our first encounter, and Blue like hits, you know, kills a goblin with, you know, like a fire arrow or something, and then had a moment like that was weird. Like, is a little bit traumatized by it, you know, which is understandable. Because like you're a kid, you're doing this, you have this power. But then also like, but has already grown into like his power in a cool way. But I think is also an interesting, like, how is he going to do with that over time? You know, like
you're giving me some good ideas for my next character. Now I want to be a teenager or just like a young character trying to come to terms with all of this power.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've just been rewatching the X-Men movies with my kids, and you know, inspired by WandaVision. They're like, "Oh, who are all these things?" I'm like, "Oh, well, let's go look at these." And you know, it's been a long time since I looked at those movies, and it is very much about that coming of age. You know, I have all this power, and what do I do with it? It's such. I mean, I guess you could call that a trope too, as far as the hero's journey goes. But it's super
the misfit trope.
fun.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as us being all old. Reliving those days again.
Yes.
Oh, the glory days.
But it's resonant and true. You know, tropes work when they're grounded in a sense of truth too, and authenticity.
Yeah, agreed.
Like you said, they're a reason that they're tropes because they recur because they ring true. Right. Yeah. It's just if they become a crutch or they become empty, then I'm not interested. You know?
For sure. Now you've been, you know, having this great time to be able to play Dungeons & Dragons through video conferencing and having some of that performance there, and then, you know, being able to have the set be safe for filming and everything as you're doing things for Star Trek. So you're getting some of that performance out there. But, you know, I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of theater professionals who are not able to exercise their craft right now. And one of them who we had on the show before, Omega Jones, was asking. He's a stage actor, and he's asking, has D&D been a way for you to perform again, like it has, you know, for many of us who haven't been able to been on stage, and again, has it helped with that, you know, temporary loss of performance in a way?
Yeah, especially the sense of of rehearsal and play, that part of performance, especially in theater, you get so much more time for that. In television and film, you get this much time to rehearse. You get thrown on set and you got to like just learn it and do it. So yeah, in terms of that sense of play and freedom to just explore and experiment, absolutely. And one of my friends from New York is an actor that we've been in touch about. Like, he's responded to my little updates. It's like he's started playing recently, and I know he shares something similar. You know, that it's been a great source for him.
Oh, that's cool.
Of an outlet. You know, I wish I'd known that he was interested, because like now I have people in New York. Now I'm like looking forward to when we come out of the other side. I know there will be in New York, like in person. You know.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
At some point,
got to play
even
on
if it's
Monday.
a little short term. You know.
Well, who knows, like all this character development that you do, who knows where these characters might find themselves in your real life. You could be pulling parts of their backstory for characters you're playing on stage.
Absolutely.
Do you have any desire to play a bard, someone that that sings at the table?
I played a bard in that one shot,
nice.
Sort of French-Canadian inspired tabaxi. So
we love the tabaxi.
Yeah. So, and he played a fiddle. That was because it was the Wild West. So his fiddle was his instrument. And
nice.
And he did in fact send a fire. I used the feat. We played like little higher level for this one shot, so we could have more stuff to do.
Nice.
And fiddled out a fireball, and then sang a little bardic
fiddled out
inspiration.
a fireball.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You know.
Yeah. You're the only one who could do 525,000 damage in one round.
I am very proud of you, Greg, for an hour and 4 minutes before you made that reference.
I like to say I was holding on to it, but it just came out at the right moment.
No, that was it dropped at a good
I think
moment.
any DM would give you that damage.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you talked about maybe DMing yourself and being, you know, kind of curious about homebrew worlds and creating stories on your own, which seems very in your wheelhouse, considering that you did write a short story recently, or that's going to be published.
Yeah.
Can this summer?
Yeah, I believe it's coming out this summer. I got asked by this woman that had actually been on at a Star Trek junket. So she does some journalism stuff. Her name is Swapna Krishna. She writes about nerd stuff. She writes about space stuff. She was a big Star Trek fan, and she was putting together this anthology of stories inspired by the Arthurian legends. And they were reaching out to authors who were of a variety of ethnicities and sexual orientations and gender identities to try to find ways to use these stories as a launching pad for maybe twisting them up somehow and exploring some of those themes through using the Arthurian legends as a lens in which we could explore these other themes also. And it's called Sword Stone Table. And I was given free reign and to do any, based on any character or anything, any aspect of it. So I started thinking about what I might want to write about. And Merlin has been a character that I've always really loved. So he's in the story. It's not about him, but he's a character in the story. And I used it as a launching pad, and I was very honored to be asked. And I wrote it in memory of a friend of mine who died in the mid-90s. So it was a way to honor him also. So yeah, there's some amazing writers that I'm in the company of. Alexander Chi is an award-winning writer who's a part of it. I mean, there's so many names. Nicola Griffith. There's a lot of people who've been named, and I was excited to be asked, and it was an honor to be a part of it.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, short stories are a great format that don't get enough play, I don't think, and it's really nice to be able to exercise those fiction muscles, right? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of DM themes, some way I'm interested in the themes that I think are really explorable in D&D around class and race, stuff that's certainly been percolating in our world. I think that DM is a perfect platform to explore some of that stuff. So a world in which some of those inequities are at play, or the tensions of those are at play is of particular interest to me. And then how do the characters that people come up with interact with that world, and that's part of what they're having to deal with. I think if I'm going to do anything, I would lean heavily into that.
That's a good way to think. I mean, I think over the last year, I've been really latching on to the chaotic good idea that you want to do good, but it is all right to mess up the systems in order to get a longer term good.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Sweet. Well, I can't wait to read that story. Whenever someone mentions Merlin, I always think of the Sword in the Stone Disney movie. So I'm hoping there's some threads there.
Well, I read the T.H. White book, Once a Future King. I guess it was the year before, and Merlin is so vivid in that book. But there's a part of Merlin's story in that book anyway where he kind of lives in and out of the normal linear path of time. So there's this period where he encounters Arthur, and he's essentially talking about things that happened in World War II. Ooh. But he sort of talks about it as if it happened to him yesterday or tomorrow. His sense of time is kind of weird and unusual. It's nonlinear. And so I'm working with that idea that he's in a time and place that you wouldn't necessarily always expect him to be.
Oh, interesting.
And it's another callback to my daughter's watching X-Men with me, and that I think in one scene Magneto is reading The Once and Future King in prison. Yeah. So there's a lot of ties there. Very exciting. Yeah. Well, I love that all of your Star Trek fans are now getting into Dungeons & Dragons, and all of our Dungeons & Dragons fans are now learning about what's going on in Star Trek Discovery. The last season has been fantastic, and I'm looking forward to season 4, as a lot of folks are. And thank you for coming on and just chatting with us. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thanks for keeping the Dungeons and Dragons dream alive.
That is us. That is single-handedly Greg and I. We fight every day to keep that dream alive.
It's true.
See?
Bearing the torch.
And I'm honored to be part of the community.
We're honored to
and
have you as part of the
we're
community.
excited that you're rolling dice with some awesome people. And hopefully,
Yep.
once all this happens, we'll be able to roll dice together
In person.
when quarantine is over.
Yes, please.
That'd be
As
great.
many times as possible.
Yes, please.
May all your rolls be 20s.
Well, sometimes Ken rolled 3. He had to roll a disadvantage in a fight recently. Three rolls in a row. He rolled natural ones in his disadvantage roll.
Oh,
That is hard to do.
that is
hard
very
to do.
statistically hard to do.
Yes.
Yes.
It happens.
We had Chris Perkins, who was one of our story writers, invented double disadvantage on the fly during a streamed game once because they were in hell. So there was a lot of terrible things happening. And the player rolled 20, 20, 20. And so double disadvantage didn't even prevent it from happening.
Wow.
And we were
That's
like,
amazing.
the statistics on that, it's like, 0.0001 possibility. And so,
That's amazing.
you got to love it.
I love those dice sometimes.
It feels like we rolled that in order to get you to talk with us. So thank you so much again. It's been lots of fun.
Thank you. Yeah. Live long and prosper.
Thank you.